Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be beginning my 8-part series on the channel where I'll be previewing every division in the NFL, going over their rosters and making my predictions for their season. Today's episode is going to be on the AFC West, and so without further ado, let's get into what I think will be the last place team in this division, the Las Vegas Raiders. So last season was a pretty standard Raiders season. They went 8-8, they didn't make the playoffs, they started off really hot, and then as you can see, because they're in 4th place, I think they got worse this offseason. The main reason for this would be them losing 3 of their best offensive linemen. As you can see, they lost Trent Brown, Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson. They also lost some receiving threats with Tyrell Williams, Nelson Aguilar, and then they also lost some of their better defensive players in LaMarcus Joyner, Millie Collins, and Maurice Hurst. That's not to say that they didn't get any better in any areas, though, either. They did add some players. They added Yannick Ngakoue, added Casey Hayward, John Brown, Kenyon Drake, and they also drafted Trayvon Merrick, who is my favorite safety in the class, and Alex Leatherwood, who's a decent enough developmental tackle. Now moving on to their offense. Firstly, I'll be talking about John Gruden and the scheme of this offense. So, as you can see from the B- grade that I gave them, I think that he's going to be able to pull together a cohesive unit on offense. I think that they're going to be able to be functioning at the very least. And I think that his traditional play calling style of just pounding the ball up the middle with Josh Jacobs, I think fits this roster fairly well. As for the roster, though, starting with the quarterbacks, they have Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. And, Carr's one of those kind of like 12 to 18, 12 to 17 type of quarterbacks, like probably above average. He has a pretty good arm. He can push the ball downfield. He's pretty accurate. He's decently mobile. My one gripe with Carr has always just been he's too conservative in general, though. A lot of the times, I don't know if it's just that he's missing the read or if he's passing it up for whatever reason, but he misses opportunities to get extra yards, to push the ball downfield a lot, and settles for checkdowns far too often, in my opinion. And then for the backup, Marcus Mariota actually has had some similar issues in the past, but he played well in whatever the half game he played last season. I think he's going to be one of the better backups in the league for sure. As for the running backs, like I mentioned earlier, Josh Jacobs, their star running back. He's backed up by Kenyon Drake and Jalen Richard, two shifty/speedy backs. Jalen Richard's a good receiver. He's shifty, and Kenyon Drake is more of that home run threat. If you give him a hole, he can take it all the way to the house. And as for Josh Jacobs, he's just a super reliable, consistent power back. Definitely one of the better backs in the league, in my opinion. So I do like what they have there. At receiver, they don't really have a number one right now. That's probably my main gripe with this room. But they have Henry Ruggs, first-round pick last year. Maybe he'll surprise me this year and become some crazy elite receiver. I highly doubt that. I think he's more of a number 2 right now. I think he'll be a nice complement to a truly elite alpha receiver, but they just don't really have that right now. Other than him, though, in the receiver room, they have some pretty standard average slot guys: Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones, Willie Snead. Nothing too exciting there. They also have John Brown, which, I like John Brown as a player. I think he's a good player. He's just a little bit redundant with Henry Ruggs, I think. He's primarily a deep threat. He's a little bit more balanced, a little bit more of a bigger body, can do a little bit more over the middle of the field than Henry Ruggs can. Far less explosive as well, but just maybe a little redundant there. I didn't really love that fit with this team. Really the only true outside receiver jump ball threat that they have is Bryan Edwards, who just coming off his rookie season. I do like him in that role somewhat. Moving on to tight end, though. This is where they're, I guess you could say this is their alpha receiver with Darren Waller. He does play a good amount of just straight up receiver, and he's absolutely dominant. Top 3 tight end in the league easily. He's backed up by Foster Moreau, who is more of a traditional tight end. I also quite like him. I think that he has the potential to be a really good tight end in the future, and he's already decent enough. Something that's not so good, however, is their offensive line. As I mentioned earlier, they lost 3 really big pieces on that offensive line from last year. That was actually one of their strengths the last couple seasons. So now they have, on the left side, pretty good. They have Colton Miller. They have Richie Incognito. I don't hate that left side of the offensive line at all. But then other than that, you have Andre James at center, Denzel Good at right guard. Then at right tackle, you have Alex Leatherwood / Brandon Parker. Either way, not too good for this season, at least. Alex Leatherwood has the potential to be really good in the future, but he's just not there yet. He needs more time in the oven, you could say. So overall, I do not like that offensive line one bit. Andre James and Denzel Good, as well as Brandon Parker, have no business starting in this league at this point. So that's going to bog down this offense quite a bit, and I'm going to give him a grade of a C overall. Now moving on to the defense. One of the worst units in the league last year. I think everyone can agree on that. And, maybe that will change this year. There's a chance. I think it was a good move to fire Paul Guenther, and Gus Bradley could be the answer there. He has had some not so great times as a defensive coordinator elsewhere. Wasn't a great head coach for the Jaguars, but maybe this is where he could figure it out. However, I'm not loving his chances given the talent that they have here. At edge, it's actually not too bad of a group. They have Yannick Ngakoue, who's their best edge rusher easily. He's a good, probably number 2 caliber pass rusher. He's not really like a real alpha pass rusher. No, he's not in that Khalil Mack, Shaq Barrett range like some people might have thought he was. But he is good. Then they have Cleveland Ferrell, their first-round pick from a couple years ago. Has not really panned out. He's more of just a run defender at this point. Doesn't really provide that much as a pass rusher. Then they have Max Crosby, who had a lot of production his rookie year, but that came down quite a bit last year. He's a good rotational edge rusher. I do like him. Same thing with Carl Nassib. He's versatile. Pretty solid run defender. Pretty solid pass rusher. Just a good piece to have there. On the interior, similarly, just decent. They have Jonathan Hankins, decent nose tackle. Not a great pass rusher, but he's pretty good gap control as a nose tackle. Big body. Then they have Quentin Jefferson, pretty good pass rusher. That's where he makes his money. Doesn't do much in run defense. Just solid. Other than Solomon Thomas is, he never figured it out in San Francisco, obviously, but he has the potential to be a plus pass rusher at least. He just has not reached that potential yet, and I'm not really loving his chances of reaching it here. At linebacker, this is a place where they have a lot of name value for sure. Corey Littleton was great with the Rams in 2019. Was very much not great for the Raiders last year. Don't really know what happened with him. But Nick Kwiatkowski was also not good last year. Nicholas Morrow is a good coverage piece. Darren Lee's just more of a special teamer than Jonathan Abram has been a real bust so far in the league. He is not a very good player right now. So, assuming Corey Littleton and Nick Kwiatkowski can rebound after last year, this could definitely be one of the strengths on their defense. It could boost their defense quite a bit, but if they play like they did last year, it's not looking good for the linebackers here in Las Vegas. At corner, this is a group that I actually do quite like. They have Casey Hayward, who they signed. He's a really good veteran corner. Probably not as good as he once was, but he's still going to be a reliable piece on the outside. Trayvon Mullen, he's just pretty much replacement level. Can play in the slot, can play outside. Damon Arnett, their first-round pick last year, was not good, but he could very much improve this season. If he does, then that would be a huge boost to the secondary. And then Rasul Douglas is a depth piece. Nevin Lawson is probably going to be their starting slot guy, and that's not exactly ideal. I'll just say that. So a decent corner group for sure. Decent corner group. And then at safety, brought in Carl Joseph, just a replacement level kind of box safety. And then they have Trayvon Merrick, who, as I said, was my favorite safety in last year's class. I think he's really versatile, good in coverage, just a good player. Tyree Gillespie, again, versatile safety that they drafted this season. I did quite like him. And Divine Diablo, again, very versatile safety, super athletic. Probably going to play more of a bandit linebacker role. Going to be similar to Jonathan Abram in this defense, I think. I think that they're probably drafting him to kind of replace Jonathan Abram, kind of be what they thought he was going to be. And I think he could get there. I like Divine Diablo quite a bit. So that's their defense. Not very good. And that's going to lead me to their prediction for this season. I think that they're going to go 5-12. So not exactly ideal. Not what Raiders fans are probably hoping for. But assuming a couple things go right, maybe Gus Bradley can figure that defense out. Maybe you can get some of those young players to step up this season. Maybe the offensive line can get figured out, and this could be a borderline playoff team for sure. I think that the ceiling is decently high for this team. They just I did not like their offseason primarily. So that takes us to the third place team, which is the Denver Broncos. Last season they went 5-11, did not miss the playoffs. It was definitely a disappointing year for them. But I did quite like their offseason, I have to say. They brought in Teddy Bridgewater to bring more stability to the quarterback position. They brought in Kyle Fuller. They brought in Ronald Darby. They brought in Patrick Surtain. Really loaded up on that corner group after losing A.J. Bouye. They brought in Bobby Massey to be the right tackle after Juwan James got hurt last year, and then they just cut him. Javonte Williams they drafted as a running back I really liked. Then they lost Philip Lindsay, who, you lose a little bit of aspect of speed in the running back room, that's for sure. You don't have that much big playability anymore, but that's okay. And they also lost Jarrell Casey, who's a decent rotational edge rusher not edge rusher, interior defensive lineman at this point. So looking at their offense, OC is Pat Shurmur. I do think he's a good offensive coordinator against probably popular belief. Failed miserably as the head coach in New York, and the offense wasn't great last year, but I attribute that mostly to the individual players and also injuries that they dealt with last year. So looking at the players, you got at quarterback, like I said, Teddy Bridgewater. Those grades on screen are for Teddy Bridgewater, not for Drew Lock. I assume Bridgewater is going to be the starter. Drew Lock just is not capable of playing in the NFL as of today, or as of last season, I guess. Maybe he's improved a lot this offseason. If he did, that would be a huge boost to this team. I just kind of doubt it. But he could very well do that, and if he doesn't, that would be huge. But with Teddy Bridgewater, not a great passer, does not push the ball downfield, but is decently mobile, can control the ball, won't turn the ball over, can work in the short game, can work in the quick game. So maybe they can figure something out with him. At running back, a little bit redundant maybe nowadays, now that they don't have Philip Lindsay in there anymore. But Melvin Gordon's a good power back pretty much. Javonte Williams, same thing. Royce Freeman, same thing. So you might really want an element of speed. You might lose that home run threat ability with Philip Lindsay, but I do think Melvin Gordon's good. I do think Javonte Williams is good, and Royce Freeman's a solid back as well. So it's a solid group there for sure. It's a solid running back room. At receiver, they have Cortland Sutton, who's coming back from his injury last year. That's going to be a big addition. He's an absolute stud. Jerry Jeudy, I really liked him out of Alabama. He's a crazy route runner, super athletic. Just had some issues with catching the ball last season. Maybe he could figure that out. If he did, that would be big. They got KJ Hamler in there, really good deep threat. Coming out of college at least, was not great last year, but he can improve his second season. Then Tim Patrick's a solid depth piece. Seth Williams is a rookie who has some crazy athletic ability. Maybe he can figure it out this season. Then at tight end, you got Noah Fant, super athletic, could be a big receiving threat in the future. Already he's pretty solid there. Albert Okwuegbunam, decent backup. And then on the offensive line, you got a good group. You got Garrett Bowles, who just had a huge season last year. Really improved, really living up to that first-round hype coming out of college. Dalton Reisner, solid. Lloyd Cushenberry was not so solid last year. He was one of the worst centers in the league, but pretty good prospect coming out of college. You're hoping he can figure it out this year, maybe with a bit more of an off season. Obviously, he didn't get that last year. Graham Glasgow, solid guard. Bobby Massey, solid tackle from the Bears. So that's a very nice unit on the offensive line, I think. Main reason they get a C here for the offense is just it's kind of tough to have a above average offense when you have Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock as your quarterbacks. So that's just the reality of the situation, I'm afraid. So moving on to their defense now. This is actually a very strong unit. They have Vic Fangio running things over here. He's a very good defensive coordinator. He is the head coach, but he's in charge of the defense is what I'm trying to say. I think that he's going to be able to, like he did last year, work with what he has and make it very effective. And this season, the talent is definitely there. Injuries are gone, and they even brought in some players. So I really do like this defense. Starting with the edge rushers, they got Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. Pass rushing wise, and just overall, one of the best edge rushing groups one of the best edge rushing duos in the league for sure. Von Miller obviously dealt with some injuries last year, but I think he could come back and still be, close to where he has been in the past as one of the top edge rushers in the league. Bradley Chubb's an absolute stud, definitely coming into his own. I got Malik Reed there as some decent depth. Beyond that, they don't really have much. So a little concerning maybe if one of those guys goes out with an injury. What do you have there? But at least for their starters, which is what I'm grading them on, very solid there. Then on the interior, they got Draymond Jones, Shelby Harris, Mike Purcell, Shamar Stephen, Deshaun Williams, just a ton of bodies that are going to be able to contribute and are going to be able to play at a replacement level or above replacement level. I do think that that's a good group. At linebacker, they have Alexander Johnson, who's a beast. He had a really good season last year. Josie Jewell, solid. They got some good depth there. I think that's a pretty solid group as well. At corner, obviously, they brought in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby, also Patrick Surtain. That's a crazy good outside corner trio. You could include Michael Ojemudia in there as well, who's second-round pick last year, I believe. He's a solid prospect, but I don't even know how much he's going to be able to see the field unless he improves drastically. Then you got Bryce Callahan, one of the top nickel corners in the league last year. He's an absolute beast. That's an insanely good cornerback group right there. Then at safety, you got Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, both really good starters, especially Justin Simmons, one of the premier safeties in the league. Kareem Jackson's a good box safety. And then as depth, you got Jamar Johnson, who I really liked. He's super versatile. He can do it all at the safety position. Then you have Caden Stearns, who has potential as high as anyone in the safety class of 2021. So overall, I do quite like the defense. I give it a B+ grade. I think that it's going to be one of the better defenses in the league. It's really just a matter of if that offense can come together. So as you can see on the screen just now, I think that they're going to go 7-10 with the potential, of course, if Drew Lock, or I guess Teddy Bridgewater, but Drew Lock is the one with a lot of potential. If he can figure it out, if he can become a good quarterback at least this season, or even great, they would be a Super Bowl contender. They would be a good playoff team if he can just figure it out and be a solid quarterback. So now on to the second place team, which I think is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. This may come as a surprise to some people, but if you take a look at their roster, it is very impressive. Last season they went 7-9, missed the playoffs, but of course with that quarterback that's new in town, that brings a lot of optimism to this organization. Then with their moves in the offseason as well, I think that they did improve their team quite a bit. They brought in Corey Linsley, the best center in the league, I think is pretty undisputable. They brought in Jared Cook, who's a good tight end to replace Hunter Henry, who they lost. They brought in Matt Filer, who's going to be able to be a solid starting guard. They drafted Rashawn Slater, my favorite tackle in the class last year, and Asante Samuel, who's a very nice corner as well. They did lose some guys. Melvin Ingram's still a free agent. I'm assuming that they're going to lose him. I think Casey Hayward went across the California-Nevada line over to Vegas, as we talked about earlier. And then they lost Hunter Henry, but like I said, they replaced him with Jarrett Cook. And then same thing with Mike Pouncey, they got Corey Linsley. So really a great offseason from the Chargers. So let's just go ahead and take a look at their offense. Firstly, let's talk about the coaching and scheme. They brought in Joe Lombardi over from New Orleans to go run that Sean Payton, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan outside zone basically scheme. I think that's going to be very effective over here. And then looking at the roster, obviously at quarterback they have Justin Herbert. Just put up one of the most insane seasons for a rookie quarterback of all time. Probably the best, to be honest. They got Chase Daniels, the backup there. Herbert, I think, I gave him a B+ overall there. Just going off of what he did last season, but honestly, he has the potential to be a Patrick Mahomes level MVP candidate this season if he can improve, if he can just become a little bit more polished as a passer. Then at running back, they have Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, and even though none of those guys are truly great runners, I do like the versatility they bring, as Eckler's a really good receiver, and Jackson and Kelly can both serve as better runners. At receiver, be on the top two with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Not a whole lot there. They're obviously both great, but Jalen Guyton, undrafted rookie last year, pretty solid deep threat. He and Justin Herbert connected on some big plays last season, so maybe you can harness that and apply that to this season as well. Then you got Joe Reed, KJ Hill, both potential deep threats, and then you also got Josh Palmer in there. At tight end, like I said earlier, they brought in Jared Cook. They also have Donald Parham from the XFL, exciting tight end, super athletic. They also drafted Trey McKitty. That's a pretty solid tight end room, I'd say. The only issue there is just that Jared Cook and Donald Parham cannot block to save their life. So that might be a little bit of an issue in the run game, especially in an offense where they run a lot of outside zone, and they utilize the tight ends as blockers quite a bit. That could be a potential issue, I think. But I also feel in a way that they can make up for that with those great tackles that they have on the offensive line with Rashawn Slater and Brian Bulaga, both crazy athletic guys. And the rest of the offensive line, Matt Filer, Ode Abushi at guard is a decent replacement level duo. And then Corey Linsley, best center in the league, and also obviously thrived in that zone run, outside zone scheme that they have over in Green Bay. So he's going to be able to apply that knowledge and that ability over here really easily, I think. So overall, I do like the offense. I think it's good with the potential to be great if Justin Herbert can improve upon what he did last year. This could be an absolutely elite offense this season, and it also waits to be seen what Joe Lombardi is going to bring to the table as a coordinator and as a play caller. But moving on to the defense now. Obviously, we have Brandon Staley running things over here. The new head coach from the Rams ran things over there really well as a defensive coordinator. So you're hoping he can do the exact same here across town. I just realized for the first time ever somehow. So looking at their actual roster, their actual defensive players, looking at the edge group, they have Joey Bosa, Uchenna Nwosu. They brought in Kyler Fackrell. They drafted Jerry Tillery in 2019, I think. And then they drafted Chris Rumpf. Obviously, this group is headlined by Joey Bosa, but Nwosu, Fackrell, both replacement level edge rushers. I think Jerry Tillery, you're hoping, can become something. He's going to rotate between edge and IDL this season. But overall, it's a good group. Looking at the interior defensive line, and we're going to see that this is not such a good group. Linval Joseph, just a nose tackle that's pretty washed up at this point. He doesn't provide anything as a pass rusher, and he's not even a great run defender anymore. Justin Jones, not much of a player. Jerry Tillery, not much of a player. Christian Covington does not rush the passer at all. So this is our first F of the series. I give them an F for rushing the passer as a group. They can defend the run decently well, I guess, but definitely not a good group there. You would have hoped that they would improve upon that. And it's going to be a big shift for Staley to go from having Aaron Donald, one of the best interior defensive players of all time, to these guys. So we'll see how that goes. But moving on to the linebackers now. They drafted Kenneth Murray in the first round last year. He had a pretty decent year last year. I thought he was going to struggle quite a bit. I thought he was quite raw coming out of college, but he actually displayed some decent enough coverage instincts, and then obviously he's super athletic and is a very good run defender already. Kaiser White and Drew Tranquill are not as good. They're both probably better suited as backups, but they can step in and provide decent enough play for the time being, I suppose. Looking at the corner groups, they have Chris Harris in the slot with Michael Davis and Asante Samuel on the outside. You know, rookie corners are usually not the best, so that's just how it's been in the past usually. It's one of the more difficult positions to adjust to in the NFL. But I do think that Asante Samuel is a very good prospect, and I think that he's going to be able to hold his own. Michael Davis is a pretty average outside corner, doesn't really do anything special there. I think Chris Harris, obviously at one point, was absolutely elite. These days, he gets the job done, at least. He's not he's not what he was in Denver anymore, but he's still a solid enough player. And then they have Tavon Campbell as well there as depth. That's a decent enough group. I give him a C+. And then at safety, Derwin James hopefully is back this year. Hasn't really played any football in 2 seasons, so hopefully we get to see him again. Hopefully he is still the player that he once was and is still a top, whatever you want to say, 5 or 1 safety in the league like he was his rookie season. They obviously have They also have Nasir Adderley there, Alohi Gilman as some depth, but they're not very deep there at safety. It's really just Derwin James there right now. So that definitely drags the grade down for the safeties. So overall, I give this defensive unit a B-. A lot of that coming from Brandon Staley's prowess as a coach. So with all that being said, I think that the Chargers are going to go 11-6 this year, which is going to place them second in the AFC West. Now on to the first place team. I bet you guys couldn't have guessed this. It's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously last year lost in the Super Bowl. Had a pretty embarrassing day, but still a great season for them. And they got even better this offseason, I think. They brought in Joe Tooney. They brought in Jerron Reed. They brought in Austin Blythe. They brought in Orlando Brown. So they brought in a lot of good players. They did release Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. That's going to be a bit of a hit for the tackles. That was a very nice tackle duo in the past. Mitchell Schwartz didn't play last year. Eric Fisher was injured down the stretch, and they also lost Sammy Watkins, which, I think that they can live with given their receiving core. So speaking of the receiving core, let's just go ahead and look at the offense now. They're gonna earn an A+ grade for the coaching and scheme. Andy Reid, obviously in charge of things here. Eric Bieniemy with the install for the offense. Absolutely dynamic duo coaching wise. Then obviously the talent they have here is also amazing. Quarterback, they got Patrick Mahomes. That's all I really need to say there. I think Chad Henne's a decent backup, I guess. At running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, really good player. Darrell Williams and Jerick McKinnon, both decent enough backups. At receiver, they have Tyreek Hill, probably the best receiver in the league. And then you also have McCole Hardman, who's a good deep threat. Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, Cornell Powell. They're going to figure that out, I'm sure. At tight end, they have Travis Kelce, top 2 tight end in the league, I'll say. And then Blake Bell backing him up. So a bit of a trend here of not having the best depth. But barring injuries for those 4 units, they're going to be absolutely elite. And then looking at the offensive line, obviously brought in Orlando Brown to play left tackle. Joe Tooney is great. Austin Blythe is good. Creed Humphrey, who they drafted, is going to compete for a job at center. Other than at right guard, they have a competition between Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Kyle Long. Other than at right tackle, they have Mike Remmers, who's probably the worst starter on this offense, but is still decent enough, I guess. So decent offensive line, and they're going to earn an A+ grade for the offense overall. So now, moving on to the defense. Obviously, you got Steve Spagnuolo over there as the defensive coordinator. I think that he's a good coordinator. He's figured stuff out down the stretch. There's been some issues maybe. People often question their defense in the middle of the season, but when it comes to playoff time, he always gets the job done. Roster-wise, they have an edge: Frank Clark, Mike Dana, Taco Charlton, Tim Ward. Not a great group, to be honest. Frank Clark's obviously the best player there, and he's, though inconsistent, a solid player. But beyond that, they really don't have anything there. On the interior, Chris Jones, Sharon Reed, Derek Nottie. That's a really good trio for the interior. Chris Jones, probably the best interior defensive lineman in the AFC right now. Absolutely elite pass rusher. Sharon Reed's also a good pass rusher from the Seahawks. I'm going to give them an A- grade there. At linebacker, have Anthony Hitchens, drafted Willie Gay last year, drafted Nick Bolton this year. Those are all starting caliber players, I think. Anthony Hitchens is a good run defender. Willie Gay is good in coverage. Nick Bolton, hopefully, is not forced to play too much in his rookie season because he is a little bit raw. He doesn't have the best coverage instincts. He's not super mobile, but he's a beast in run defense, at least in college. And I think that's going to translate decently well to the NFL. Corner, Charvarius Ward and L'Jarius Sneed was the big duo of last season. They both emerged as really good corners. They brought in Mike Hughes, who's going to be good outside corner depth. DeAndre Baker, maybe you're hoping you can make something out of him. They seem to be very good at developing cornerbacks, so maybe he was a first-round pick at one point. Maybe he can figure it out here. And they have Rashad Fenton. And then at safety, of course, Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, headlining that group. Also have Juan Thornhill, who's a decent center fielder. Will Parks is a nice, versatile piece to have there. Sorensen is their guy. He always comes through with the big plays in the playoffs. And you also have Armani Watts there. That's a really good group. I do quite like those safeties. And I do quite like this defense overall. I'm going to give them an overall grade of a B on defense. And all of that leads to my prediction of 14-3 on the season. So that's going to be a video. If you're still here, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.